That went relatively smoothly. So start again and say, hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And welcome to my presentation about our Geri-Arctic adventures on Ellesmere Island. We were traveling on the beautiful lands of the Inuit, who, since long time ago, have been living on this beautiful land and living intimately on the land and continue to do so. This was not a commercial trip. We were a group of adventurous friends, organized and led by Chris Cooper. And Chris and another member, an old Arctic hand named Sandy Briggs, who some of you may know him. They've both been to the Arctic numerous times, so we were in very good hands. I used a small Lumex camera, which I just hung around my neck to keep it both warm and handy for photography. And I'd like to let you know that there are 3 sections to the presentation. Each section comprises a set of still images, and then these are followed by a video. And in the stills, I give a context and note a few things to look for in the videos, which provides a more full picture. So you'll be introduced to the team in the first video. So let's go. Now, this is our logo, Geri-Arctics, you're never too old. There's another old friend of, old Arctic hand, but he's also a little bit old too, named John Dunn. So he's got quite a sense of humor. So he took this, he didn't come on our trip, but he was very helpful with passing on knowledge and information. He took this a photograph, and in it he put Sandy Briggs on a walker, just as a joke. That was a reference, of course, to our collective ages. However, this was actually prescient because Sandy had just retired, moved back home to New Brunswick, and was out going skating when he fell off his skate blades, broke his hip. So that was only 5 months before we were leaving. But he did not bring his walker with him. In fact, his hip did very well. It was his knees that were more of a problem. So an overview of where we are in relation to the rest of Canada. We're 14 degrees north of the Arctic Circle up there, just down on the southeast corner of Ellesmere Island, within elbow tapping distance of Greenland, as you can see. And if you wanted to go to Toronto, you just hopped onto the 80-degree longitude west and slid right down there due north of Toronto. So a peek into preparations. Ross Wyburn, some of you may recognize. He was the founder and president of Serratus Mountain Products, which ran in MEC, Mountain Equipment Co-op, for 25 years until they outsourced. But he's still passionate about sewing. So he volunteered to make our sled bags, which you can see over on the left there. And I just realized I can't find that little highlighter. I'll look for it later. Another very important part of our expedition planning was the food. So we were each allowed about 1 kilo per person per day. And that included our own breakfast and lunch and a group dinner in rotation. We cooked for everybody 4 different times. So it worked out very nicely because we were a group of 7. Here we are, all boxed up, ready to take it over to Canada Post and ship it up to Resolute Bay, where they looked after it for us. Excuse me. The other very important thing in our kit was first aid. So Nurse Nancy put together a very complete first aid kit. And we, being all seniors, we included a evacuation insurance paper, and we also included a brief health profile of each of us, just in case. And Barbara, that's Chris's wife, she was our base camp manager. She also had a copy back home. As it turned out, I think we only ever used one single Band-Aid out of there. So an overview of where we went. Mackensen Inlet, as I mentioned, drains to the right there into Baffin Bay. And you can see quite a difference in topography. You've got Bentham Fjord where we landed, and quite narrow and steep, lots of glaciers flowing in. Then you've got Mackensen Inlet itself, which changes in topography, still some glaciers, a little bit rugged, but getting flatter and drier. And then going around into Pili Bay, it's even flatter and drier, more delta. So quite a change there. You can see we didn't go very far, only less than 60 kilometers, not counting day trips. But we were there because we wanted to experience the environment, to see the Arctic, not to make miles. We wanted to see the plant life and the wildlife. So that's what we did. We had a soft goal of perhaps finding an abandoned airstrip, which had been used by some people in the party, or at least friends, which is down on at the far end of the upper ear, you might call the unicorn horror of the Pili Bay. But as it turned out, the weather had a different story. So we wound up staying at Camp 9 and 10, which were very close to each other, for several days and making our own airport there. That's where we were. So here we are flying over Bentham Fjord, looking down, getting really quite excited. Oh, look, there's icebergs, and look, there's bear tracks and a seal hole. Wow! It was so exciting. We were beside ourselves. And so we had a beautiful day. This word, by the way, wow, we wore it out. And because everything we saw every day, there was something wow. We were in a twin otter, and this one has just left us, is leaving. Beautiful day. So off he goes, and then we were breathless. It was super quiet, nothing. And so any nervousness that we might have felt, it just dissipated, and we were just all so excited, looking around and happy to be there. And then we realized, well, we better get busy and make our camp. So off we went and make camp. And this is Bentham Inlet looking west to the head, and that's the direction that we go up to on a day trip the next day. You can see the smooth ice caps up there. The bay is the fjord rather is beginning to soften, water puddles around, and the shear zone, which I'll mention shortly, around the edge between camp and water. Looking straight across the fjord, another glacier. It looks like chocolate cake with white icing on top. It's so smooth. You can see that the cliffs are a bit steep. And then looking east, not quite east. This is right around camp, where there's a shear zone, also called a pressure zone, also called Polar Bear Highway, for obvious reasons. The polar bears are wandering along looking for what they might find in the water. The tide is about 3 meters high, but from half a meter low. And it's fairly consistent year round, and it's, more or less the same. So there's a bit of meltwater there. So it's not as salty as the ocean water, but it's not as fresh as fresh water either. So it's just beautiful textures. And here we are on our first day trip, just enjoying, having a good time, looking at the sculptures, the different formations. We saw a seal hole. Bad news for the bear, no lunch today. Good news for the seal, he wasn't lunched today. In another place, you'll see it in the video, Fred puts his ski pole down in the hole. It was about a meter deep before it ran into some more ice or something down there. So we hung out around the icebergs, just admiring all the different features and how they're made. Real artistic sculpture, round balls on the base of this one, crystal balls and forms on the bottom of this one, and a little bit frozen meltwater. Some of us were on snowshoes and some of us were on skis. And as we went around this, you can see that the bear has also been around there. You can see on the glacier that there's more iceberg's going to calve off when the time is right. So here we are. This was probably the most physically difficult part of the trip, was pushing our sleds up and through the pressure zone over to the campsite. Sandy was our camp scout. So when it was time, he would find a route through the pressure zone and a good campsite, and then we would have to maneuver our sleds over that way. They weighed between 70 to 90 kilos, depending, well, this was at the beginning of the trip. Yeah. So here's camp. Again, the pressure zone, and this is looking out towards Mackinson Inlet. Sorry, the dog might be barking in the background there. So yeah, just lots to look at. This is called an ice foot where we're camped. It's solid underneath, and some were wider than others. Safe. You can see where we had, I don't have that pointer, sorry. You can see over to the left part way where we put up a wind barrier around our cooking area. And then there's a shovel there because that's the way where we went over to our toilets that we centered. Oh, now there's a video.
Okay, nothing up my sleeve, magic trick for parties. Put index finger over little finger, and then slide the middle finger through. Neat party trick. Bring it back through.
Gross.
I was afraid you'd say that.
There's a reason.
Okay. Random party trick.
Okay, we'll move on to the next section. Here we are crossing a lead, and a lead is our lead in the ice is rather like a crevasse in a glacier. It can be narrow or wide, it can be hidden or open. So it's one thing that you always have to keep an eye open for. And in this case, Sandy must have been daydreaming because he walked out onto some slushy area over a lead that was actually closed over, except for this soft snow. And he went in, but he quickly grabbed onto the edge and removed one ski. The person that was behind him quickly undid the harness and on the, he undid the harness on the sled, and he was able to pull himself out. It would have been difficult for somebody to help him given the circumstances. But he then walked up to your right, up the far side of the lead, and we walked up the close side for, reasonable distance before we were able to cross over and join. He was okay, wet. He changed the clothing on his top and left on his fleece pants, which dried very quickly because the air is quite dry up there. However, that was a wake-up call for all of us. And Chris is very conscientious about safety. So to reinforce it for everybody, made a little ceremony that night at camp and presented Sandy with this good luck amulet that Chris had been carrying with him. And also the little ridge, rocky ridge or cape where just nearby where Sandy fell, we named Cape Alexander. So there you go. So it was near here that we saw our first polar bear. Now the story is that we had just finished dinner, and then Nancy and I went up on the little rock area right to your left of the screen. And it wasn't very high up, just a matter of, I don't know, 5 meters or something like that. And looking at the grass, it was a small area, see what had been nibbling on it. And then I looked down on the other side, and on the bear highway was a bear. And Nancy and I were so excited. We were high-fiving and dancing around. And then I yelled down to the others, "Bear, bear, get your cameras." So they did. And with all the commotion, Mr. Bear, or maybe it was Ms. Bear, looked up at us and sniffed and put the ears up and took a few steps, and then the other out off the highway and looked. And by then there was quite a commotion. And so it looked around and sniffed and carried on and trotted, and then finally just trotted away out of sight. That was really very exciting. That was our first bear. And you remember the old song from your childhood days, "The bear went over the mountain." Well, this bear, or many of them, went over the mountain and had a great time doing it. Look at all the tracks up there. And I did find the poker, you see. So there's tracks here and over there. They're all bear tracks. The luge, we called it the luge here. Look how they maneuver around. And this one came down and went over a little cliffy thing and then wandered off. More tracks over there. So we were wondering, how does the bear come down? Back, front, butt? But eventually I looked it up on Google and found out that they can come down any old way, which makes sense. But unfortunately, we missed witnessing their fun. So here we are now, camping off the snow on gravel, and no longer melting snow for water, but getting it from the ponds, the meltwater there. And we had more freedom to walk here, able to go up some ridges and just get a whole different view. You can see how the topography is changing here. Then another camp. Look at the beautiful purple saxifrage. We were absolutely kind of stunned about it, because except for our colorful little party and our equipment, we were just used to shades of blue, shades of brown, and shades of white. That was our environment. Purple saxifrage was a real treasure. And but we had to be careful not to stand on it, which was really quite difficult. Now, this is our little tea house. Being seniors, well, those of you who are, you'll understand that it's very nice to have tea and scones or tea cakes in the afternoon. So Richard in the red there, he was our designated tea and scone guy. So every day for 28 days, we stopped in the afternoon, and Richard, using the Whisper Light stove and this little portable collapsible heat oven thingy, so we made scones every day. Can't beat that, hey? We also climbed up on ridges. The rock was actually very fragile, so it tinkled, kind of sounded like glass when it fell off. It was also very sharp, could easily cut the skin and your clothing. Now there is a bit of moss or lichen up there, I should say. I'm not sure where it came from because it was really quite lonely up there. A view of our campsite. We never dragged the sleds. We never dragged the sleds off the snow because we didn't want to ruin the friction on the bottom, the slipperiness of it. But you can also see here where there were some old tent sites, and by old, I mean really old. And another one here. We didn't touch those. We took the rocks to anchor our tents from other places. But the reason I say these are very old is because they've got lichen and grasses and in between them. And the lichen, there's different kinds of lichen. It'll grow anywhere from like 0.5 millimeter a year to maybe 1 or 2 millimeters a year. So they hadn't been disturbed for a long time. The other thing to note is that this ring here for their shelter is on a slope. So obviously the land has been creeping for quite some time. Otherwise, this would have been flat. I'm sure of it. Okay. Now, come on, move. I've got some stuff coming up on my screen that won't let me change the darn it. Excuse me, please. It's giving me updates and stuff like that. I'm not sure how to get rid of it. Excuse me while I try and do something here. Oh, it's gone now. Good. Okay, another view from the ridge top, looking out over Mackensen Inlet and Pilley Bay. We were going to be crossing this piece of water here, about 7 kilometers over. And Sandy and Chris, they didn't really say too much about it, but the rest of us were thinking, that looks awfully wet. I wonder how we're going to do that. I wonder how deep it is. I didn't bring my bathing suit and ever such thing. We were going to go over to, this is called, I've just lost the name, Swillington or a cape over here. This marks the division between the south arm of Mackensen Inlet to the west, right in front of us, and behind there's another arm. And we wanted to go up, climb up the, oopsie, just set laser pointer. Want to go up here, make a camp here, and then go up here and have a look around and get a good view of what's on the north side. However, that plan was kiboshed because Chris and Barbara were in communication by sat phone every evening, and Barbara gave a weather update, and she was warning about a low pressure area coming in. So we decided to forego that and carry on down the coast along the shoreline and find a more secure campsite.
Just water's fine.
Okay, now our final section. You can see now how the land is much wider, wet, flat, and more stark and forbearing, I guess is one way you might say it. So So this water is running from snowmelt on some little slopes just to the left where we had put in a kitchen, but we only ever cooked one meal there because it was just too windy and wet. And so we moved out behind tents, sheltered by sleds, and then eventually we moved inside the tents for our cooking. So we started out the trip with very lovely weather, and then you can see that it's turned not so lovely. And here there's big fields of gravel. These lines that you're seeing here are not very deep, maybe up to a foot deep or something. Rivulets, they're all over the place, and they make really nice microclimates. And in them, you can have flowers, grasses, lichens growing. So we spent time wandering over there. And then away over here on the far side, we came across what we thought might be old snowmobile machine tracks. And we confirmed it later when we were talking to people back in town that indeed, occasionally people do go up there on snowmobiles to go hunting. Now, between Camp 9, which was that one, in a place called Turn Cove, and Camp 10 up here is only a kilometer difference. We stayed in Camp 9 most of the time, but every day we went up because we had to find an airfield where we could be picked up. We obviously weren't going to make it down to the end of that Pilley Bay where we had thought we might find an airfield that would be maintainable. So the plan was to set up camp up near the airfield where we found a place here, measured it off, and Chris checked with the station manager back in Resolute. And he said, yeah, that sounds good. Let's go for it. So we had to do some leveling, which you'll see in the video, and then eventually move our gear over to be close by. Now over here, we can't see it, but we found a narwhal tusk frozen in the ice. And way over here, we found a small herd of muskox of 5 creatures. And then there were also some Brandt's geese in the area. So the winds were picking up and making a nuisance of themselves. In this case, they went up to about 80 kilometers an hour. So here's Fred lying with his feet on the poles. Everybody was lying with feet on the poles or their backs on the poles so they wouldn't collapse, because should any of the poles break, we'd have been in considerable trouble. So we spent quite a while doing this kind of leg exercise. Also, Fred and I had a very comfortable tent, but it had been on many expeditions, and we found out that this was one expedition too many, because once the winds turned around and went broadside and flattened the fly against the screen, against the wall of the tent, it wasn't waterproof at all. So on one day I measured and we took out about 2 liters of water, wringing it and putting it into any container that we could find, including the frying pan that we cooked in down here where we had our scones. Now here we are, because it sleeted and snowed and rained a little bit every day. We had to drain the puddles because you can imagine that the pilots wouldn't want to come in and see nothing but little puddles everywhere. They might turn around and go home again. It was quite interesting, this piece, because the water ran here and then just decided to go straight down into the gravel. Would have been nice to see a cross section and exactly where that water was going and what it looked like underneath. Now we're laying out the parameters of the landing field that we'd chosen. We took our blue tarp, cut it into squares, and Susan there, she's 5 feet. So she lay down and Chris measured his pace against her height, which happened to be exactly 5 feet. So Chris walked around the perimeters and we put in markers on the corners and down on the edges so that the plane would know what the borders were where it could land. You can see that there's fresh snow on the hills and that the clouds are still very low. So a time to now, as we're getting near the end of the trip, talk about personal reflections, how people thought about the trip. Here's Chris and Fred. And Chris, he just really can't resist the lure of the Arctic, so much so that he planned to go to Baffin Island, and that would have been last year, 2020. But unfortunately, because of COVID, that plan had to be canceled. He loves the remote wildness, the attraction of the polar bears, and most of all, or not most of all, but equally, working with a compatible team member. We found Chris to be a conscientious leader, always concerned for the safety and the well-being of team members. And Fred, he just loved the experience. He loved traveling on the sea ice, seeing the wildlife, the narwhal tusk. It brought back memories of his mountaineering days. In fact, despite having early stage Alzheimer's, Fred participated as much as anyone. It's just that his short-term memory is rather ragged. So we had to remind him of what was happening and what he needed to do. On a personal level, not a day went by that he didn't express his appreciation for everybody's support. So it can't get any better than that. Susan and Nancy, well, everything Susan did was a new experience for her. Riding in a small plane, snowshoeing, camping, crossing ice leads. She'll always remember the absolute quiet, the roar of the wind and the snow sparkling like diamonds. She was surprised and delighted by all the Arctic flowers in bloom. Nancy admitted that she'd been really quite nervous about the trip, but once she arrived, she was just so excited about everything, fascinated with all kinds of life, big and small. And I'll never forget how excited she was when we spotted the first bear together. We were high-fiving and dancing on the grass. She said she felt peace and felt at peace the whole time she was there. She was reluctant to leave, actually. It was with heavy heart. So the first thing she did when Chris said he was thinking about going to Baffin, Nancy said, well, I'm going too. So, okay, so now Richard, because some of us had little mascots, Richard was beginning to think he was with a group of people in their second childhood. But indeed, we were all as excited as young children with our experiences. So Richard remembers a lot of giggling coming from Nancy and Susan's tent and had them washing their hair in cold snow melt water. But then he did the same thing. They were the only three with clean heads of hair. He was also stranded when you'll see a little bit later about the plane getting almost stuck in the gumbo. So he was a bit worried about getting stuck here, whereas Nancy, I think, would have been delighted. Sandy here, he is excited to return to the Arctic, but he was concerned about how his new hip would fare. But in fact, it did very well. And it turned out his knees were more wobbly than his hip. He was impressed at how everyone kept their spirits up during these last 13 days being storm-bound in camps 9 and 10. Difficult conditions, high winds, rain, and snow. And he attributes the success to the cohesion of the team. In fact, in 30 days on the ice, there was nary a tension or a bad word expressed, which is pretty remarkable. As for myself, I was just so happy to have the opportunity to be there. I loved everything except maybe our leaky tent. We learned that the Arctic is not barren. You just have to look closely for life. And nature's power can erupt quickly and fiercely. Now, making an airstrip, who would have thought we'd be doing that? So here we are, the plane is landing. This is a bit more long-winded on a 1 or 2 slides, but it's an interesting story. We were finally ready for the planes to come in. We had given them a 5-day window, and day 1, 2, 3, and 4 went by. Actually, on day 3, they said they were coming, and then they canceled it because of weather. So now this day, they were actually coming in, taking a load to Grise Fjord, a hamlet about 100 kilometers south of us. Then they were going to inform us that they were coming, and we would then have time to take down our tents. Everything else was packed, but suddenly the plane came overhead, and we all had to leap up, and let's see, they had to run out with their makeshift windsocks here to get the plane to know where to come. It flew over back and forth about 3 times, sussing it out, and finally it came, but it came beyond the edge of the airstrip because all the waving of arms didn't help them to realize that they had to stop, actually. So somebody's got their mute off. I can hear talking. So they came and they landed and they went into the boggy part, and then all of a sudden they turned and they really gunned their way out to get back into safe ground. That's the part that Richard was worried about. In fact, we probably all were. So they do carry a shovel. These are tundra tires, and they had to come up, scrape off all of this muck. And on one of the next shots in the video, there's going to be mud all over the wall. This is where it came from. Took a little bit home with us. Now, this is not a bad slide, and nor is it the inside of a marshmallow. We had a wonderful trip out for the first part, going back to Resolute. Then suddenly, this is what we were flying in. We thought, boy, we hope the pilots can see better than we can see. And so on we went. We got to, for quite a while, there wasn't any conversation going on inside. Then we could sense that we were dropping down for a landing. And all I could see out of my window was a tiny tabletop patch of brown. Then suddenly we weren't landing anymore. We were lifting with a big roar. And still we just looked at each other and said, now where are we going? Because it didn't feel like we were turning back at all. Felt like we were going on to another hamlet. Then we did. Then all of a sudden, here we were coming in for another landing, but we didn't know where. We hoped the pilots did. We could see a few lights on the bottom. Then we landed very gently. The pilots were absolutely amazing. Very gently. And because it's a short takeoff and landing, we landed within 200 meters. That was really quite incredible. We landed, and I don't have a picture, unfortunately, but the station manager was bowing and doing his namaste, his grateful thankfulness that we were all landed so nicely. Then we were in a bit of a hurry. We had to unpack our sleds, take away all of our extra food that we were leaving behind, and pack our bags for travel. Now, only Chris and I were traveling on a Friday morning, and it's already pushing midnight on the Friday. On the Thursday night, we were all traveling on Aeroplan points, so we were only allowed to travel 2 per flight per day. So it happened that Chris and I were on the first flight, and the others would follow. All this food we had left over, people in the community, I believe it was people at the school, agreed to sort it out and distribute it where there was need. So now on with the final video. Whoops, what am I doing? What did I have?
Siping wakukutasa isungang wapitadui Isongang wapitadui itu ahea umiumwami neritalingwami aya 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 iya aya aya iya aya aya Isongang wapitadui itu ahea umiumwami neritalingwami aya 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 iya aya aya
Life's too short, life's too short. Life is way too friggin' short. Ain't no say, I need a lot, man. Ain't no say,